Welcome to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fish and Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome back to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. Lots of stories to talk about this week, including a unique population of sharp-tailed grouse living in Southwest Idaho, why you need to watch out for coyotes this time of year, and exterminating Idaho's public lands of litter bugs. But first, lots of positive news coming out of last week's 2024 Hunter Harvest Report, including the first time in a while we've seen increases in hunter harvest numbers across all three species. So, without further ado, let's dive in and talk about what it all means. Big game hunters apparently got after it in the fall of 2024, accomplishing a statewide hat trick of hunter harvest increases, the first time since 2020, of elk, mule deer, and white-tailed deer. Hunters are no strangers to swings in populations and harvest, and Idaho Fish and Game wildlife biologists highlight that each year. There are a lot of contributing factors, but last year's hunter harvest is a hopeful indicator that herds are once again back on track. Not to harken back and beat a frozen horse, but it always helps to put things into perspective in regard to the brutal winter of 2022 and 2023. That winter didn't just leave its mark in the record books, it greatly impacted mule deer herds in Idaho. The hunting season that followed some 6 months later came as no surprise as statewide harvest dropped. But fast forward to 2024, a year that granted Idaho's deer and elk some much-needed reprieve from harsh winter weather, and now we could be starting to see the dawn of greener pastures for both big game and big game hunters alike. It's still a little early for biologists to read the tea leaves and know how the 2024 and 2025 winter survival will affect this fall's hunt, so stay tuned for more on that down the road. But moral of this story, increased hunter success across the board in fall of 2024 should be chalked up as a win. After all, hunters can't harvest animals that aren't there. Like I said earlier, there's not too much to go over in the lows department since harvest of all three species increased. But let's start with mule deer this time since they were the tragic stars of the dramatic 2023 winter. After a 22% drop in harvest, remember these numbers are statewide, from 2022 to 2023, it was enough to put a smile on any mule deer hunter's face to see that number go from 18,568 to 23,898 in the fall of 24. And elk were no different. While the stalwarts of the mountains didn't necessarily see the same impacts of that brutal winter as their smaller, long-eared cousins, elk harvest in 2024 still rose roughly 13% from the previous year. Nearly a quarter of all general season elk hunters last year successfully hiked out of the mountains with an elk on their back, a statistic also slightly up from the previous hunting season. This year's harvest landed at 97.5% of the 10-year average, which makes it about as close to a quote-unquote normal harvest as you can get with fluctuating annual harvests. What about whitetails? What were they up to last fall? Well, I'm glad you asked. White-tailed deer represented the only X in the win column back in 2023's Hunter Harvest Report, where the primary W word was winter, not whitetails. But for the last 2 years now, white-tailed deer harvests have kept pushing the needle clockwise, accounting for roughly a 9% bump since 2022. In 2024, roughly 48,766 white-tailed deer hunters took home an estimated 20,908 whitetails statewide. So, let's dive in a little bit further and kick things off with elk. If you recall, the drop in 2023 elk harvest was a bit of a head-scratcher. Anecdotally, Fish and Game heard reports from experienced elk hunters who were not finding elk in their usual spots during fall and suspected that maybe a combination of hot temperatures and scant precipitation might have been a significant factor. Toby Bedreau, our deer and elk coordinator, stated that the dip in statewide harvest did not reflect a dip in the overall elk population, but it would possibly take another year to know for sure. A year later, that's exactly where we're at, and Fish and Game biologists believe the statewide elk population is healthy and relatively stable. Here's Toby.
While things vary from elk zone to elk zone, statewide elk populations tend to stay relatively stable from year to year, And last year's drop, combined with this year's increase in harvest, is right in line with the annual fluctuations. We are trying to help mule deer populations rebound after the tough winter of 22-23.
Additionally, general season hunter success crept up a little bit to 19%, which is right on par with previous years, while controlled hunt success shot back up to 42% success rate from last year's 23%. Next up, we got mule deer. All eyes were on muleys last fall for reasons stated a billion times already in this recap: severe winter. However, the winter prior to last year's hunting season was as mild as Norwegian hot sauce, and as predicted, paved the way for some good news in the mule deer hunting department. A total of 73,748 mule deer hunters successfully harvested 23,898 mule deer, nearly 30% more than 2023. Of those, only 3,380, or 14%, were antlerless. Now, that's important to note here. One might see a 30% increase in overall harvest just 1.5 years after a brutal winter and have some concerns, particularly for eastern Idaho does. After all, isn't the purpose of limiting antlerless hunting to rebuild herds? Well, that's exactly what Fish and Game wildlife managers did coming out of last winter. While the winter of 2024 was indeed mild, wildlife managers in eastern Idaho still aim to give mule deer does and fawns another year of limited antlerless hunting in hopes of bringing those numbers back up. And so far, it appears to be working. Remember, it takes several years, not a year, for mule deer to rebound from harsh winters, especially statewide. Winter severity tends to be inconsistent throughout the state, so one area's herds might take a hit while others thrive, which can offset each other and lead to similar statewide numbers despite changes in the local herds. Also note that outside of this eastern Idaho bubble, mule deer numbers statewide have been relatively stable in recent years. Buck harvest specifically went up by nearly 5,000 in just a year, and depending on the final results from this year's winter fawn survival, we could see more of that trend play out in 2025. All right, last but not least, we got whitetails. Fall of 2022 was a low spot for whitetail deer harvest. The reason for that 10-year low was not bitter cold, but hot, dry weather and biting midges. Epizootic hemorrhagic disease, or EHD, wreaked havoc in the Clearwater region's whitetails that summer, killing an estimated 6,000 to 10,000 deer. So, to see 2 consecutive increases in whitetail harvest is a good sign for wildlife managers and hunters alike that whitetail herds are moving back in the right direction. An estimated 48,766 white-tailed deer hunters hit the woods last year, with 40% of those successfully bagging a deer. Who knows, maybe the same 48,766 hunters went 2 for 2 during the past 2 years, as hunter harvest success was identical. That's just a joke. As predicted, though, heading into the 2024 hunting season, overall harvest numbers for whitetails increased from 19,828 to 20,908. Like with any species, and as mentioned numerously in regard to muleys, it takes time for animals to rebound, but whitetails tend to rebound more quickly. Back in early 2023, Boudreaux forecasted another 2 to 3 years before the Clearwater's whitetail herds would be fully recovered, but optimistically pointed out that they were in fact, quote-unquote, over the hump. And while the jury's still out on East Idaho's mule deer, the verdict on the Clearwater's white-tailed deer is in. The herds abounded right back. But with that said, the year ain't over. Please be mindful that even as April and early May melt snow and the hills begin to green, the deer are still energetically stressed from previous winter conditions and its effects on their body. Deer go into the winter with the groceries on their back in the form of fat, and the less they are stressed and pushed around on the winter ranges, even during early spring, the more likely they are to survive. And sadly, green forage does not mean all fawns will survive their first winter. Overstressed young mule deer can die with bellies full of green forage because their weakened bodies are unable to adapt to the higher nutrients. And last thing I'm going to say here, hunters, you make these kinds of insights possible. This might shock a few people, but knowing how many deer and elk get harvested by hunters every year depends on, well, the hunters. Your involvement gives wildlife managers important hunt and harvest information that directly goes into gauging herd health across a state, figuring out where and how much hunting pressure takes place, and ultimately setting seasons and rules for the future hunting seasons. This is conservation at its core, folks. Nobody's asking you for GPS coordinates or bullet weight or what flavor mountain house you packed. It's did you harvest, yes or no. So hunters, take pride in knowing you're doing your part to ensure game populations remain healthy and resilient, and ensuring each species will still be there to hunt for your kids, the next generations. Now, the moment has already come and gone to fill out hunter reports for last fall, but this is a reminder that better information means better management, which in turn can mean more hunting opportunity, because a lack of good data can mean shorter hunting seasons and or fewer tags. I know it still feels like a century between now and the fall of 2025 hunting season, but take this simple reminder and file it away. Make it a tradition every year. Do whatever you think it will take to remind yourself to fill out your mandatory hunter report after next fall's hunt. You can also be the first to know all happenings by subscribing to Fish and Game's Big Game newsletter. So folks, it's your big game herds, so take pride in how they're managed and conserved. To see a full breakdown of harvest stats by species, hit the link below to read the full report. All right, let's take a little break from talking about deer and elk and take a little drive to a small pocket of Southwest Idaho to Gettin Lek-ky. Anyone who's ever taken a drive along Idaho Highway 95 knows what sagebrush country looks like. It's yellowish brown, spans as far as the eye can see, and often appears completely void of life upon first glance. But have another look. Pull out the binos if you need them. And after a while, a whole other world of fauna comes to life amidst the grasslands. For Idaho Fish and Game biologists in Southwest Idaho, there's one particular upland game bird species of note hiding in plain sight within the bunch grass. Every spring, they show off their best dance moves to hopefully attract a mate. The spectacle is one of the most unique performances put on by the animal kingdom and signifies the first chapter of the Columbian sharp-tailed grouse's story. Here's Nathan Borg.
Sharp-tails are such a fascinating bird, but they don't get near the attention that sage grouse do.
Borg is one of our regional biologists who drives around Southwest Idaho's grasslands every spring to locate and count populations of sharp-tailed grouse. If you're a little surprised to hear of a population of sharp-tails in Southwest Idaho, you're not alone. While Idaho's southeast corner generally hosts most of the state's Columbian sharp-tailed grouse populations, there is a tiny cluster of birds located just east of the state's Oregon border near the town of Midvale. Columbian sharp-tailed grouse are a medium-sized upland game bird with a light brown appearance, pointed tail, and conspicuous white spots on its wings. They are one of 6 living subspecies of sharp-tailed grouse in North America and are an important upland game species to the sportsmen and women of Idaho. The Columbian subspecies was first reported by Lewis and Clark in 1805. Once considered the most abundant upland game bird in the Pacific Northwest, Columbian sharp-tailed grouse now only occupy less than 5% of their historic range in the U.S., and approximately 55% of the remaining populations are found right here in Idaho. Research shows that the primary causes for the decline are habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation of land. Idaho is fortunate to have populations of Columbian sharp-tailed grouse to support some hunting opportunity. Hunts occur in the southeast, Upper Snake, and a small portion of the Magic Valley region and run October 1st through the 31st with a 2-bird daily limit. For sharp-tailed grouse to thrive, they need a lot of wide open spaces and habitat comprised of native bunchgrass and shrub bunchgrass communities. Rangelands typically offer the full spectrum of the bird's needs, which is where Borg's Lek surveys lead them. During spring, male sharp-tailed grouse gather on traditional breeding areas called leks, or dancing grounds. Males go through elaborate courtship displays and vocalizations to attract a female for breeding and then defend their territory on the lek from other males.
Imagine waking up at first light and then dancing and fighting for the better part of 2 hours. Now do this every day for 6 to 7 weeks, and you get a glimpse into how male sharptails spend their spring.
This courtship routine can begin as early as mid-March and sometimes carries on into May. After a successful endeavor, chicks will hatch in May or June. Fish and Game biologists count Columbian sharp-tailed grouse at leks each spring. Leks can be as few as 2 birds, but there are some in the state with more than 50 males in attendance.
Lek surveys, along with harvest data, allow us to keep a finger on the pulse of the population. Not all leks get counted every year, but we've documented birds attending more than 400 leks over the last 10 years.
So if you find yourself in Idaho's grasslands during the spring, keep a sharp eye and you might get to witness a courtship display unlike any you've seen before. Now, normally I don't encourage you folks to jump ship mid-podcast to go do other things, but while we're on the subject of sharp-tailed grouse, there's a hot new video that just hatched on our YouTube channel. Take my word for it, it's a lot more enjoyable to see a video for your own eyes than me babbling about it on this here podcast. So hit the link below to check it out. It's called Dancing Grounds. It's on our YouTube channel. Alrighty, since we're already crouched down in the sagebrush, here's a good reminder to keep your dogs on leash this time of year while coyotes begin their denning season. Coyote activity across southern Idaho, especially in those areas where people are recreating, provides Idaho Fish and Game an opportunity to remind recreationists to take precautions with their pets to reduce the risk of conflicts with coyotes, especially during the denning season. Fish and Game staff in the Magic Valley region were recently made aware of a non-fatal coyote incident with off-leash dogs in the Snake River Canyon. The encounter with an aggressive coyote occurred near Auger Falls, a natural area managed by the City of Twin Falls Parks Department. A group of bike riders with 3 off-leash dogs were using the Auger Falls trail system when an off-leash dog was bitten and chased by a coyote. Reports indicate that one of 3 off-leash dogs ran ahead of a group and found a coyote den. It was then that the dog was attacked by the coyote and sustained multiple bites. The riders reported that after the attack, the coyote continued to follow them for about a mile down the trail. Twin Falls City Mayor Ruth Pierce said, quote, "Please remember that Auger Falls and surrounding public lands are wild environments shared with wildlife. For everyone's safety, keep dogs leashed at all times, respect wildlife by observing from a distance, and never approach or feed them. Let's be responsible stewards for these amazing wildlands that surround us," end quote. In early April, a resident of the Wood River Valley reported a coyote repeatedly approaching her and her dog while on an area paved bike trail. While the coyote did not act aggressively, it reportedly did come uncomfortably close to the pair several times. These recent incidents occurred during the coyote breeding and pupping season, when coyotes can become more territorial. Over the last few years, Fish and Game's Magic Valley Region office in Jerome has also received several reports of dog-aggressive coyotes throughout the Magic Valley, most commonly in or near the Snake River or in the Wood River Valley. Quote, "During breeding season for any wildlife species, wildlife can become aggressive towards people and pets. Our advice is to avoid known areas with coyotes during this time of year, and we always strongly encourage all dogs to be kept on leash when in the areas," said Mike McDonald, Regional Wildlife Manager in the Magic Valley region. Coyotes are highly adaptable animals, and denning can occur even in city parks or along urban river corridors, which have good hiding habitat and abundant prey species. Encounters between coyotes and domestic dogs can happen at any time of year, and coyotes can always pose a risk to dogs in situations where they view them as either a prey source or as competition. The risk increases during the mating season, which is usually late February to early March, or during pupping season, which is March through May, when coyotes, particularly males, become more aggressive and protective of their dens. Coyotes are generally active at night, though they can be spotted during the day. They're naturally fearful of humans, but may become more comfortable if given easy access to human food, garbage, pet food, small domestic pets, and feral cats. Here are some steps that homeowners and recreationists can take to keep their pets safe and prevent coyotes and foxes in urban areas from becoming habituated to living near people. For homeowners, remove or secure coyote attractants, such as pet food, trash, or dog feces, as well as attractants for native species that coyotes are known to prey on. Coyotes typically eat small animals such as mice, voles, squirrels, gophers, raccoons, skunks, and foxes. Enclose backyard poultry, livestock, or other small animals that live outside with secure fencing and a roof. If possible, ensure your property boundaries are secure by keeping fences in good repair and letting your dogs out for bathroom breaks only in fenced areas, particularly at night. Don't leave your dog outside unsupervised, particularly in areas where coyote conflicts have been known to occur. If your property is not fenced, turn on outside lights and make noise before letting your dog outside, and consider taking your dog out on a leash for nighttime bathroom breaks. Clear away brushy areas around your property that coyotes may see as a safe denning or hiding spot. For recreationists, keep dogs on leash when using trails. Consider bringing a loud noisemaker with you, like a whistle, bell, or a horn, which can be helpful in scaring off a coyote. Remember last week when I talked about bear spray and knowing how to use it? Well, the same can be applied for coyotes. It's not just for bears and can also be used as a highly effective tool against other wildlife if an unsafe encounter occurs. When you're hiking, make noise to announce your presence. Be present in the moment and aware of your surroundings and your dog. Don't use earbuds or headphones while hiking. If you know that an area has recently experienced dog and coyote encounters, consider using a different trail system or an entirely different recreation area. For more information, contact the Magic Valley Regional Office at 208-324-4359 or call up your local regional fish and game office. I have to say, I got a little emotional when I saw the byline on this story. If you want some more guidance when it comes to recreating in coyote country, hit the link below to read former Regional Communication Manager Terry Thompson's very last story. Then, after you're done listening to today's episode, head back to episode 55 of this here podcast for a full-length chat between Terry, Ben Bieri, and myself. Terry, if you're listening out there on your coconut radio on the beaches of Maui, I wish you all the best, my friend. All right, moving on to a story from Senior Conservation Officer Caleb Brower about keeping Idaho's public lands clean this season. As the weather improves and temperatures start to perk up, it's fair to say that all Idahoans will be itching to get outside. Idaho Fish and Game's conservation officers would like to remind those of you who will be enjoying Idaho's outdoor spaces to be mindful of your trash and encourage all outdoor enthusiasts to leave our public spaces better than when you found them. Officers have seen an increase in the amount of litter at many public access sites over the last few years. In 5 short minutes of cleanup, Senior Conservation Officer Caleb Brower from the Magic Valley region collected a large amount of trash at a popular river access site. Aluminum cans, glass bottles, glass shards, a section of carpet, fishing line, styrofoam worm containers, multiple cardboard boxes, and plastic bags were collected from the area and disposed of by the officer in a nearby dumpster provided to park users. And aside from just being an eyesore, litter can be hazardous to our wildlife, too. Many birds, small animals, and even deer or elk can be entrapped or entangled in our garbage, causing sickness or life-threatening issues for those animals. These animals can also confuse our refuse with food sources and go about eating them. Littering, folks, is also illegal. As obvious as that is, it bears repeating. If caught in the act of littering, a person can be cited for an infraction violation and is required to pay a fine of $206 for their first offense. Even if you do a great job to ensure that none of your trash ends up in the wrong spaces, you can always do your part to leave the land better than you found it. Make it a habit to collect trash on your next outdoor adventure to help improve your favorite hiking trail, fishing access site, or dispersed campgrounds. You know, it seems like every summer there was always at least one weekend afternoon when I'm driving back from a camping or fishing trip and see a dispersed campsite with a mountain of trash and a still smoldering fire left behind. Shoot, I've even seen them with fires still flickering, and the folks are probably already back on the interstate. As an outdoorsman, it's one of the most frustrating things you see. I can't wrap my mind around why someone who just spent all weekend fishing, hunting, or whatever, enjoying Idaho's wild places, decides to throw it all out the window. Literally. Beer cans, trash, whatever. I guess I'll never understand those types of people, but for those of you who see trash and pick it up and do your part to keep these places we love to get out and explore, thank you guys so much. Remember the slogan, "Idaho truly is too great to litter"? Those words came out in the late 1980s, and true words have never been said. Folks, we're dang lucky to have what we have here in Idaho. So let's all work together to keep Idaho clean this spring. All right, enough of the soapbox. Hit the link below if you want to read Caleb Brower's full story. Last thing on the agenda, new big game seasons and rules booklets will be hitting the streets soon, but can be downloaded digitally on our website. Here's what's new this year. The 2025-2026 big game seasons and rules booklets are now available online. The Fish and Game Commission set the new seasons and rules back in March, and the public comment period garnered roughly 14,700 comments from hunters. The department altered many of the initial proposals based on that feedback. Here's Fish and Game Director Jim Fredericks.
People who engage in the process know that Fish and Game staff frequently modify proposals and adjust final recommendations to the Commission based on what we've heard from hunters. Commissioners further consider public input before they make the final decisions, which may or may not follow the Fish and Game staff recommendations.
The new seasons and rules also included input from the two working groups that focused on deer hunting in the Southeast region and elk hunting in the Clearwater region. Both working groups submitted proposals to the Commission for their consideration, many of which were adopted. Fish and Game staff also convened a hunting and advanced technology working group to assess public perspectives on what is and what is not considered fair technology to use in big game hunting and made recommendations to the Commission. Commissioners approved moving a series of proposals on hunting technology into the rulemaking phase, and people will be able to comment on those proposals during spring and summer. Printed booklets are expected to arrive at Fish and Game offices and licensed vendors in late April. Due to a paper shortage, there are different thicknesses of paper within the first run of booklets, and later printings will be consistent paper. There are a handful of notable changes for the upcoming season, including CWD hunts in the Panhandle region and year-round mountain lion seasons. So hit the link below to read Roger Phillips's full story on our website. That's all the major stories this week. Let's hit the rapid-fire bulletin. In the Magic Valley region, the Big Wood River and some portions of Silver Creek, two popular fishing streams, are closed during the early spring months. The entirety of the Big Wood River will be closed from April 1st through the Friday before Memorial Day weekend of 2025. This fishery will reopen on May 24th, 2025. The section of Silver Creek from its mouth upstream to the bridge near milepost 187.2 on Highway 20 west of Peekaboo is now open year-round. All other portions, including its tributaries, are closed through the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. These portions of the fishery will reopen to fishing on May 24th, 2025. During the March Commission meeting, the Idaho Fish and Game Commission directed staff to include the final recommendations, of which 23 out of 23 members were in support of the Hunting and Advanced Technology, or HAT, working group in developing negotiated rulemaking proposals, public outreach, and policy recommendations. The HAT working group consensus recommendations were specific to 9 various topics, which you can read online. We encourage folks to provide input on the proposed rule changes during the negotiated rulemaking process. Specific recommendation and draft recommendation language can be found on the HAT working group webpage, link in the description. Idaho Fish and Game's Managed Hunt program is looking to enroll properties for the 2025 hunting season. Since 2022, Idaho Fish and Game's Southeast region has been working with regional landowners to provide hunting opportunities on their properties for hunters through the Managed Hunt program. This unique program forms partnerships among willing landowners, responsible hunters, and Idaho Fish and Game to manage hunting access on private lands to benefit landowners and hunters alike. If you are a landowner who is interested in learning more about the Managed Hunt program, please contact the Southeast Region Office in Pocatello at 208-232-4703. Idaho Fish and Game will be conducting road work along Wapshilla Creek on Craig Mountain Wildlife Management Area. Pretty sure I butchered that one. The road washed out 2 years ago and has needed significant repairs. For anyone planning on hunting in that area, work is slated to start April 14th and will continue until May 30th. Contact the Clearwater Region Office for more information, including how to pronounce that creek, at 208-799-5010. Okay, that's it for this week's stories. It's time for our question of the week. All right, so another question I snagged from the Idaho Hunting and Fishing forums this week And once again, shout out to the one and only Tara Reichert, our licensing expert, for her help getting to the bottom of this one. The user asked, so I'm originally from Idaho, but I was in the Navy and I have lived out of state for over a decade. I'm retired from the military now. My sister is getting married in June, and while I'm there, I'd like to go fishing a little bit. So I need to buy a license. I've found online that disabled vets can get reduced prices, but do I have to be a resident for that? So, assuming they still live out of state and is therefore a non-resident, the only military option is for the Disabled American Veteran Hunting License, which includes 3 free days of fishing and costs $31.75. It would require the individual to provide documentation showing that they are 40% or more service-related disability. There isn't a military discounted fishing license for non-residents, so they could either buy a $22.75 daily license or $7 for each additional day, or a $108 annual license. Hope this helps. That's all the news we have for this week. Thanks for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin. If there's something on your mind, or if you got a question related to fish and game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch you next week.